Like Sudha mentioned, we actually did a very similar panel yesterday, and I didn't have any slides. So what I realized while I was speaking is that for the entire 7 minutes duration that I was talking, my face was, like a close-up of my face was on both of these screens. So now I know why everyone had slides. I don't have slides today. I have one slide, which I hope will delay how long my face is going to be on the screen. So maybe if you guys can just put it up.
Click it forward. You can click it forward, yeah.
So this is actually from the humor section of the IDR website. So anyway, so I thought today I would talk about 2 or 3 things that have really shaped our journey at IDR with respect to people and capacity building. The first one has to do with our business model. The second one has to do with our governance and how we invested in our own capacity building from quite early on. And the third has to do with our use of tech. So in 2016, this is before we started IDR, we went around looking for donors to support this idea to build a knowledge platform in the sector. And we had a meeting with Ashish Dhawan. And we had pinned a lot of our hopes on this meeting because nobody had funded us as yet. So we go in and he's sitting in the office and he has our business plan and our budgets in front of him, and we're selling him this idea of IDR. Now at this time, the way that we had conceived of IDR was that, there we go again. So the way that we had conceived of it was that we would have an in-house team, and it was the in-house team that would actually go to research organizations and nonprofits and consulting firms and get a lot of the data, the insights, the research, and we would write in-house. And Ashish is listening to us, and then he kind of made this passing remark where he shared what The Wire had done. Now, The Wire had been around for 3 to 4 years already, and what they had actually done is that they had outsiders writing for them. And what that had allowed them to do is actually to maintain a pretty lean budget and a pretty lean team for quite some time. So that really got us thinking, because as being a nonprofit and a media organization, we knew that we would face difficulty with ongoing fundraising. Now, around this time, we were also we were also doing research and talking to a lot of nonprofits and just people across the sector to try and understand where people went to learn, what were the sources that they would go to read, and so on and so forth. And the idea was that this would inform the product that we built. So we spoke to about 100 people. 92 of them said that they don't read. So we were kind of in this interesting situation where we had a business model that people would find too expensive, and we had a product that nobody was going to use. So then when we launched, we decided to go ahead with the Wire model, where essentially we said we'll just get other people to write for us. And what that did for us, it did a few things. The first is that it actually allowed us to stay a very, very lean team for quite some time. So up until August of last year, it was just the 3-member founding team. And until then, we had published 250 articles. We had, 2 out of 3 of IDR's articles were published across 60 mainstream media channels. And none of this would have been possible if we had gone with our original idea. We would have needed more people. And yeah. The second thing it taught us was to learn from people outside of the sector. The Wire example really helped us form our own business model. So that's something we continue to do at IDR a lot. And the third thing it did is, and we didn't quite anticipate that this is how it would go, but the third thing it did is it kind of solved the problem of people not reading. Because what we realized when we were designing the product and the website is that people in our sector were a lot more interested in the authors that were writing. So even when we looked at initial data of how people would interact with the website or interact with our email newsletters, they were interested in who was talking about what. So if Anil Swaroop, who is the ex-education secretary, was talking about education, they wanted to learn about that as opposed to me writing about what Anil Swaroop has to say about education. That has since changed, thank God, but for a while it was that. The second thing I wanted to talk about is governance. So one of our co-founders, Smarnita, I think she did a phenomenal job in building our board. She was very strategic about it. We have 4 board members, and each of them comes with expertise that we cannot afford to pay for. So one of them has a wealth of experience in building and growing startups, and we have leaned on him over and over again in the last 2.5 years, and he really pushes us to think more creatively about how we're using technology. We have another board member who's a finance specialist. This is an NGO audience, so I don't think I need to underline how important this skill is. We just hired somebody for finance this past week, but up until then, we've kind of been leaning on her. Another board member of ours is an economist by training, worked at the Center for Policy Research and a bunch of other policy-oriented organizations, so brings that experience to bear. And then our 4th board member is a leadership coach. And she actually spent time with us, and this brings me to my point of sort of investing in capacity building right from the beginning. We're very fortunate to have her spend time with us, with the founding team, which is 3 of us, individually as well as together, to help us build our own leadership capabilities, but also to get us all aligned in what we were building and to help us be the best partners we could for one another. The 3rd thing I wanted to talk about is how we use tech. So we are a tech platform. I mean, we're an online, we work in the digital space. So I thought I'd just kind of talk about one example. If you were to think of how we produce stories on IDR, and if we were to break down the process, it's essentially 3 steps. There's sourcing, and that is sourcing of ideas, stories, people, and so on. The second is writing, editing, producing the stories, and the third is distribution. And the first 2 bits of that process are actually quite inefficient because a lot of the people that we want to reach out to are not already online, so we have to find them. They're not all based in cities or places that are accessible, and a lot of times we have to travel to where they are. Not all of them speak in English, so we have to translate, transcribe, write the piece, and then there's a fair amount of back and forth as well. So it's pretty inefficient, but what tech has allowed us to do is really fast track the distribution. And in a sense, balance the inefficiency of the first half of the process, because once it's published, it has the power to reach anyone sitting anywhere interested in that topic. And then, of course, there's a lot of data that comes from that then serves as a feedback loop back into what we choose to publish, what people are interested in reading, the conversations that are happening, and so on and so forth. I have to say that I think that we're probably barely scratching the surface in terms of what tech can allow us to do in serving our community, and it's something that we are still learning every day. But I think the small and the little ways that we're already using it has given us such tremendous gains that I think it's going to be increasingly crucial for us to really unlock what tech can do so that we can serve our community of readers better. And in terms of 2 takeaways, I would say one is learning from people outside the sector. It's not something that comes intuitively, and maybe it applies more to us because we aren't necessarily working on programs with communities, but I think that a fresh perspective and new ideas have really helped us at every stage of new initiatives that we've run at IDR. And I think the second learning for us has been that quality is inefficient, and that's fine. So as long as we can use tech to make up for some of those inefficiencies, then we're okay. I'll stop there.
Thank you so much. One other thing that you talked about, which I think also belongs on the takeaway list, is what was also underscored by Donald Lobo in the previous panel, which is to use technology and data to improve your core product. It's a continuous loop of learning. It should not stay in the zone of being there because donors have asked for it and there's a reporting obligation that you have. If you can use the data coming out of your work to go back and improve your core product, I think the technology serves its purpose very powerfully. Thank you so much for sharing, Rachita.